figures in modern history embody the spirit of anti-colonial resistance, anti-imperialism, and social determination as profoundly as Ho Chi Minh. Uncle Ho, as the Vietnamese adoringly named him, turned bamboo sticks into weapons and transformed a nation choked by the colonial yoke into a graveyard for empires. You see, in the early years of 20th century, Vietnam was a country shackled by the heavy chains of French colonialism. The land was plundered, its people reduced to laborers in their own country. Amid this landscape of subjugation, one man emerged with a voice that would only awaken a nation and the forces of anti-imperialism across the world. Born Nguyen Sin Cung in 1890 in central Vietnam, little Ho didn't have a childhood. He had a revolutionary boot camp. His dad, a scholar fired for dissing the French and side-eyeing imperialism like quote-unquote, "This is your best shot." At 21, Ho Chi Minh left Vietnam, working on a ship as a cook, the future liberator of a nation, flipping burgers for the colonizers. Little did the French know, this was the man who would one day serve them defeat on a silver platter. Ho traveled through the belly of the beast, traversing London, New York, Boston, and Paris, collecting revolutionary ideas like Pokemon cards for anti-imperialists. Then in 1919, he pulled a power move. At the Versailles Peace Conference, he handed the Allies a petition demanding the independence of Vietnam. Their response? Crickets. The French delegates at the conference ignored him. Ho's reaction? Quote-unquote, "Fine, I'll start my revolution with blackjack and Lenin." His encounter with Lenin's writing was nothing short of a spiritual awakening. Here was a fine blueprint against imperialism, a framework that would ultimately explain why the Vietnamese bled so much under foreign rule. It was in France during the post-World War period that his revolutionary consciousness crystallized, and that the name Nguyen Ai Quoc, quote-unquote, Nguyen the Patriot, he penned searing critiques of colonialism in French journals, exposing the hypocrisy of a country that spoke of liberty while enslaving its colonies across the globe. The French colonial elite hated it. Of course, truth has a way of stinging. After discovering Lenin's writings, Ho had what can only be called a political awakening. In France, Ho joined the French Communist Party, not because he loved burgers, but because these were the only way of not pretending colonialism was civilization. In his 1920s writings, Ho Chi Minh did not spare the imperialists. He roasted colonialism in French newspapers, exposing a nation preaching liberty while enslaving others. In 1922, for instance, he called the French anti-colonialism quote-unquote justice holding a sword, but the scales turned into opium pipes. Over the following decade, Ho immersed himself in revolutionary activity, traveling to the Soviet Union and China, working with comrades from across the colonial world, and preparing for the moment he would return to Vietnam. That moment came in 1941, when he slipped back into the country under the alias Ho Chi Minh, meaning quote-unquote he who enlightens. From a cave in the northern mountains of Vietnam, he and a small group of committed revolutionaries laid the groundwork for a movement that would upend the course of Vietnamese history. At the height of the Second World War, the returning Ho Chi Minh formed Viet Minh and immediately declared war on France and Japan simultaneously. Needless to say, World War II was a blessing in disguise to nations under the yoke of colonialism. The war shattered French control over Indochina, and this is when Ho saw his chance. Besides, the French underestimated Ho's strategic genius. His party, Viet Minh, united nationalists. His party Viet Minh united nationalists and communists under a single goal of independence. Then, in 1945, without blinking, Ho stood in Hanoi's Bardin Square and declared Vietnamese independence, poetically quoting the US Declaration of Independence. The speech echoed the American Declaration of Independence, invoking the rights of all peoples to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a deliberate irony that was not lost on the colonizers. Imagine quoting your oppressor's constitution as you evict them from power. Poetic, pointed, and devastatingly effective. Yet, independence was short-lived. The French returned, determined to restore their colonial grip. What followed was nearly a decade of brutal war. Ho Chi Minh, as the leader of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, guided the resistance with both strategic brilliance and unshakable resolve. Then in 1954, the French generals with American support picked a remote valley to fight. Big mistake, I must say. Seizing this opportunity, Ho's forces dragged artillery through the jungles. At Dien Bien Phu, the French found themselves encircled by Viet Minh troops who hauled artillery through the mountains, deeming it impossible for the French. The result? A humiliating surrender that signaled the end of European colonialism in Asia. Finally, a breath of fresh air, yet peace proved fleeting. Now, it was America's turn to get sparked. Still, the struggle was not over. Entered the chief imperialist, aka the United States of America. The USA, fearing the domino effect of communism, propped a corrupt regime in South Vietnam, plunging the country into a further 2 decades of war. What followed? The US dropped more bombs than in World War II, using Agent Orange, and spoiler alert, they lost. Why? Because guerrilla warfare plus socialist discipline equals unbeatable combo. You see, the Americans followed the oldest trick in the colonial book, divide and conquer. Vietnam was split on the 17th parallel, not by popular will, but by the so-called international community. The North, under Ho's leadership, remained committed to socialism and national unification, while the South fell under the series of US-based regimes. For Ho, this was an artificial divide imposed by foreign powers, not a reflection of the Vietnamese people's aspirations. The country, he insisted, must be unified, not as a pawn in the Cold War, but as a sovereign nation, whole and free. Then came the American War, a conflict the West called the quote-unquote Vietnam War, but which Vietnamese people remember as yet another chapter in their long resistance. The United States, armed with superior weaponry and massive resources, launched a campaign of destruction that devastated the land and claimed millions of lives. But what it could not destroy was the will of the Vietnamese people. Under Ho's ideological guidance, they waged a guerrilla war grounded in discipline, strategy, and unyielding belief in their cause. The Vietnam-American War was a brutal testament of imperialism's adaptability. But guess what its antidote is? You are right, it's socialism. That's why, as an organization, we are fighting to actualize this philosophy, seeking inspiration from Ho's enduring legacy. Even in death, we celebrate his true warrior, an antidote against the 3 intertwined evils of colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Ho's defiance, wit, and unshakable belief in the canons of Marxism and the power of grassroots movements have made him a global symbol of resistance. Ultimately, the French Empire is gone, and the American Empire is apparently in its dying phases. It is up to us, socialists and revolutionaries, to keep carrying the torch to inspire future generations. The Vietnamese are a true reflection of revolution. Uncle O shows you should never underestimate a man who fought with bamboo sticks and sheer audacity. The French were left on their knees following the bankruptcy. largely contributed by the world wars and the dozens of anti-colonial movements across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Consequently, the United States took over where the French failed and left. Spoiler alert, the Americans did not survive the Vietnamese well-oiled machine. So what about Ho Chi Minh's legacy? Despite dying in 1969, 6 years before the Vietnamese total victory over the Americans, he managed to create a revolution and lit a fire that could not be extinguished. Not even the Americans, with their barrage of artillery and trillion-dollar budget. Throughout the war, Ho Chi Minh remained a moral and political anchor. He was not a ruler who demanded opulence or personal praise. He lived modestly, often seen in his simple khaki uniform and rubber sandals, eating the same meals as his comrades. To the people, he was Pak Ho, Uncle Ho, a figure of both revolutionary strength and personal humility. He wrote poetry during wartime, emphasized education and literacy, and nurtured the idea that the Vietnamese Revolution was not only about land and governance, but about the dignity of the human spirit. In 1969, Ho Chi Minh passed away, not living to see the full reunification of Vietnam, but his legacy did not die with him. In 1975, when Saigon fell and the country was finally united under the socialist flag, it was clear that his vision had triumphed. The city was renamed Ho Chi Minh in his honor, not because he sought so much recognition, but because the people insisted on it. In his last words, Ho Chi Minh muttered, quote-unquote, "Cremate me, don't waste land." Even in death, this socialist revolutionary was trolling. Today his body is mummified against his wishes because revolutions love drama. His body lies in state in a mausoleum in Hanoi, visited daily by citizens, students, workers, and international visitors. His writings are studied not as a relic of a bygone era, but as living texts full of insights on resistance, unity, and national dignity. Ho Chi Minh's life offers a profound lesson for the world, that liberation is not granted, it is won, that justice is not a gift, it's fought for, and that the oppressed, when united with purpose and vision, can humble the most powerful of empires. So the next time someone questions you whether socialism works, ask them, for who? Because in Vietnam, socialism did more than resist. It built, it educated, it healed, and it stood tall against the storm. We revolutionaries will forever honor Vietnam, the graveyard of empires.